This panel, featuring elected API women from a diverse range of experiences and constituencies, will highlight navigating the political process, crafting policy, agenda setting, and building strategic alliances to pass effective policies. So without further ado, let me go ahead and pass it off to our moderator, Christina Kuo. Christina is currently a senior strategist with Grassroots Solutions. She has over 20 years of experience working in advocacy, civic engagement, and campaigns. She has led successful local and statewide efforts, working with policymakers on key issues, and is currently based in Michigan. So I will hand it off to you, Christina.
Great, thanks so much, Nisha. It's so good to be here with everyone. Really excited to introduce our panelists today. So first up, we've got State Representative Padma Kupa from Michigan. Padma is serving her first term representing Michigan's 41st House District, which encompasses the cities of Troy and Clawson. State Representative Kupa came to the US from India at the age of 4 and grew up in America before moving to India as a teenager. After receiving her bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from the National Institute of Technology, Warangal, Kupa moved home to the US for grad school. Kupa has lived in her district for more than 20 years, so welcome. Next up, we've got Senator Regine Bisco Lee from Guam. Born and raised on Guam, Senator Bisco Lee is a strategic communications marketing professional and community advocate, and has served in both the public and private sectors. In 2009, Regine was named one of the 100 most influential women in the US by the Filipina Women's Network for her work on behalf of the rights of World War II Filipino veterans. Welcome, Senator Lee. Next up, we have Assembly Member from New York, Yuli Newt. Yuli Newt has spent her career working on legislative and advocacy campaigns. In 2016, Yuli was elected to serve the 65th Assembly District, representing the following Lower Manhattan neighborhoods: the Lower East Side, Chinatown, South Street Seaport area, Financial District, and Battery Park City. Yuli began working on state policy issues while in college, and eventually accepting a position with the Washington State House Health Committee Chair. While there, she helped develop policies to expand senior access to prescription medication, improve women's health care, and expand health coverage for low-income women. Thank you. Next, we've got City Councilwoman Shang Tao from Oakland, California. Shang Tao was elected November 2018 to the Oakland City Council, representing District 4 with 11,736 votes. She's the first Hmong American woman to be elected to City Council in the state of California, and the first Hmong to be elected to the city of Oakland. Shang Tao is the daughter of Hmong refugees, parents from Laos. Shang was born and raised in Stockton and is the 7th of 10 children. She is a domestic survivor, and as a single mother, Shang put herself through college while working and raising her son. She graduated as valedictorian from Merritt College and transferred to UC Berkeley, where she earned her degree in legal studies. Thank you. Really excited to be on this panel with so many great women. First off, we thought we would start with some just questions. What does governance mean to you, and how might your perception or understanding of governance differ as you shifted roles from activists or organizers to candidates to now an elected official? I think first up, why don't we just go in the order that I introduced everyone, and we'll mix it up a little bit for some of the later questions. So State Representative Kupa.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to all who are joining us today. I'm honored to represent Troy and Clawson, and I've always fought for public education and ensuring access to equitable public education for children across our state. And so becoming an elected official, I was not prepared for the variety of issues that would come up, nor how it would be to legislate in both chambers in our state legislature are Republican majority. And we have a new Democratic governor, Gretchen Whitmer, Big Gretch. And so it's been kind of contentious. And that's not what I was looking for. But what I did, we had training in the very beginning after elections. And so kind of got a handle on what I needed to do. And so I went and looked at all the policies that my predecessor had put forward and they call them orphan bills. And so I decided that I would focus my legislation on ideas that he might have already introduced, because a large part of them came from individuals within the community. And some of the legislation that I introduced is a result of people in the community advocating for them. And I've talked to some of my fellow legislators on both sides of the aisle since I've been in office. And I think that's really what I think is the most rewarding, is working with constituents and putting ideas forward that they embrace. Governance in general, though, these last 18 months, but especially these last few months, has been very contentious. And I think you just need to watch the national headlines to see April 30th was very scary. Walking into the legislature that day, across 5 feet away from me, as I was walking this way, walking that way, was a person who had a cooler, a huge Confederate flag, artillery weapons all around his body, and there were hundreds of people that came in eventually to the Capitol. And you know, so that's been sort of the backdrop these last few months, and politicizing public health, and wearing masks. So it's gone from trying to be cohesive, coalition builder, listening to constituents, to this. And so, yeah, it's just, that's what governance has been like.
It's been a rough, I think, it's been a rough couple of months for, I think, a lot of lawmakers. Senator Lee?
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me, Christina?
I can.
Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure. Well, thank you so much, first off, and a huge shout out to APAICS and the team for creating this space for us, and really for the opportunity to participate in this summit along some very inspiring leaders. I'm really grateful to be here. In terms of the governance question, I think that governance at its best is rooted in these structures and institutions that are supposed to help the public, right? We're all supporting the common good. And I think whether you're an activist or an advocate or a policymaker, helping the community should always be the goal of everyone involved. And so in that respect, my mindset hasn't really changed during these past 4 years in office. I just feel like I've been entrusted to a different position to really achieve this goal. And so, you know, my goal has always been to help working families and to push policies that really support, that benefit families and benefit small businesses and our environment. So I continue to do that in my role as a senator in the Guam legislature.
Great, thank you. Assemblywoman Newt?
I mean, I think that, you know, I've taken on a lot of different roles in government, so maybe my perspective is a little different, but I mean, as a young person, I just always thought that government was this untouchable thing, that I couldn't really touch it, access it, reach it, change it, do anything to it. And so it was always a very interesting kind of dynamic, because I think that a lot of people feel that way. I think that a lot of young people feel that way. I think a lot of people of color feel that way. I think that, you know, a lot of folks in the Asian community feel that way, that it's not something that affects us or that we can impact. And I think that that's also kind of reflected in, I guess, the fact that we have so little representation in a lot of ways, because, you know, we don't feel like if we participate that it'll matter, right? And I think that a lot of times, you know, when I was a young person, I thought that, you know, it was something out there, ephemeral, right? Like something that isn't something we can impact. And as I grew older, I realized, like, you know, I need to at least see what it looks like in order to, I guess, I don't know, create anarchy, dismantle a little bit. And so, you know, when I decided to be an intern for the Washington State Legislature, it was kind of when I saw things, bird's eye view of how things worked. And I realized that there is no big secret, that there's no big secret to accessing government, that it's really that there were powerful people who had their own interests, and they don't want you to know that there is no big secret. And it's really about making sure that people participate, that folks are actually involved. And I've always seen governance as kind of this reflection of your community and like a voice for your community, and then making sure that we have more access, more transparency, and an ability to be able to make sure that other people know that there's no barrier, that there is access, that there is transparency. And so for me, I've always wanted to be that person to bring that access. And so it didn't matter what role I was playing, whether it was an intern, a staffer, a person working in nonprofit for the Statewide Poverty Action Network. It didn't matter what role I was sitting in. I felt like my job was to become obsolete somehow, and to really be a person who was going to help people to understand how to advocate for themselves. And so that's still my role now. And I think that it's really important to make sure that we are helping folks to understand how to access government and how to change things the way that they want to.
Great, thank you. Councilwoman?
Hi, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. You know, I think I fall along the same lines as the assembly member. You know, growing up as a daughter of refugee, we grew up really impoverished. And so I actually was the one, my brothers and sisters and I, we were actually the ones who were teaching our parents. And so I'm actually first generation to receive a formal education. My parents are not formally educated. And so it's been, you know, when you have all of these like real life obstacles of like, how do we get food on the table? And, you know, how do we get to school? And, you know, how do we mend the holes in our clothes or what have you, you really don't have the opportunity, or you feel like, you know, you don't have the capacity to take on more. And so for the idea of government, it has been pretty new in the sense that it wasn't instilled in us as we were growing up, as how I'm doing for my son now. And so, you know, quite honestly, how I fell into politics was I took on an internship at City Hall, and as a single mom going through college, everybody knows that, you know, the term starving students. I actually took on this internship because they were giving out $1,000 as a stipend in the summer. And so I decided I would do it, you know, and get some experience along the way. But what I realized was like, oh my goodness, like, you know, all these policy changes that I want to see in the world, you know, all of these major issues that impacted my family, my parents, and the people around us, they were being governed, and the bills were written, you know, laws were written behind these, you know, the dais. And so I knew that this is where I needed to be. And so, you know, I've always led with community first. And, you know, I think the biggest difference now coming on the other side of the dais is that, you know, you're not fighting for just what you care about, but you have this huge constituency that you represent. And so for me, I've always charged myself with leading through my community first, and really taking in what their thoughts and what they feel like I should be voting on or what have you. But ultimately, you know, I make sure that my votes are aligned with my values and my morals, which is supporting working families. And not just that, but I want to be able to wake up every day, look in the mirror, and be proud of the person that I'm looking at. And so that all goes hand in hand, and it gets really difficult. But, you know, if you follow your moral compass and try to collaborate and work with other people who may not have the same ideals as you, which is okay, right? Because that's why we have representatives, you know, then you can't go wrong.
Great, thank you. Before I jump into the next question, I just want to remind participants, if they've got any questions for the panelists, please feel free to drop them in the chat box. We're going to try to get to as many as possible. So Councilwoman, I'd like to stay with you here. Since taking office, what have you gathered in your effectiveness governance toolkit, and what would you say has been your most powerful tool?
You know, I think that my most powerful tool is my community. You know, what I have learned from being an elected official is that if you don't have community, and if you are not able to listen, then you can't get much done. And I am just, you know, I pride myself on being a consensus builder on the city council, right? We have basically, if you look at ideology or whatnot, you can essentially say we have a 4-4 split, right, on the city council. And so for me, it's really important for me to work with the community and through partnership with the community, because they can also put pressure on other council members and then working and listening listening, really truly listening to my colleagues and what they really care about, because a lot of the times we can work things out, the nuances, to the point where we can get that fifth vote and get things done. And so I'm really big on making sure that we have progress and movement and getting stuff done in the district. And that's a part of it. It's just really listening to my colleagues and but keeping that relationship with the community, because I always tell them, I cannot do my job if I don't have a partnership with my community. There's just no way.
Thank you. Senator Lee?
Thanks so much. I think for me, it always comes back to that very core value of respect. And even though I might disagree with a colleague about a policy, I really try very, very hard never to disrespect anyone in a way that could close a door or burn a bridge. I think, like what the council member said, it's really an effort to build coalitions. That's super necessary if you want to get anything done in a lawmaking body. And for us on Guam, the legislature requires an 8-vote majority. And so that's 7 other people that I need to work closely with and align with. And I think that having brilliant arguments alone won't get it done. Being the best orator will only get you so far. If people sitting next to you can't stand with you, then it really is all for nothing. But I've seen it happen so many times. Some of my colleagues will preach passionately for their full allotted time. And at the end of it all, because they haven't really chosen to secure the support of others because they spoke at their colleagues instead of directly to them, the effort fails. And so one thing I'm particularly proud of is a personal commitment that I've made to myself, is a point that I've made to introduce legislation with each and every one of my colleagues. We have a very small body. There's only 15 of us total, but I think that this is a real tangible representation of my commitment to come to a consensus and to try to find common ground with all of my colleagues. And also, just remembering who I am. I am a mother of 2 young girls. I am a daughter of Guam. And I think, that respect and being really rooted in my community has really, really helped me in terms of effective governance and my toolkit.
Great, thanks. Assemblywoman New, share a little bit about your effective governance toolkit and your most powerful tool.
Oh, I think that, what the council member said about listening is one of the biggest, most powerful tools that we have. I think that, one of the things that my Uncle Bob always taught me was that, there's never a wrong way to lead. Like, there's a lot of different ways that you can be a leader, right? And I think that there's a lot of times everybody's always like, oh, the alpha male, like, like this is how you lead, this is what leadership looks like, this like whole charismatic leader thing. And I've just never been that, I'm like this like very, I don't know, introverted type of person who kind of brings in a lot of information before I, decide things. And I think that it's always been a little bit different. And I think that it was really awesome to hear one of my mentors tell me that it's okay to be that way, and you can still be a leader. You can lead from wherever you sit, and it doesn't matter if you have a title, it doesn't matter if you have a desk or a pencil even. Like, you can do different things in different ways. And I think that that is powerful, and that's a type of leadership that I learned is acceptable and is okay, and it's okay to be a person. I talked a lot recently, as we passed again an extension for the Child Victims Act here in New York, and I think that it just really showed that people can understand if their leadership is human, and I think that there's a lot of times when people forget that we are people. And I think that it's oftentimes when I think that people who are sitting in office forget that they're people. And like, I think that there's this detachment that isn't real, and I think that it's okay. And I think that that is a huge lesson that I've learned, that I'm like, it's actually okay to be me and sit in this position. And that's huge, I think, for a lot of women, and for women of color, and for queer women. And I think that, one of the other things that I wanted to say is that, we oftentimes believe that something's already been done or something's already been said or other people have that knowledge or perspective in the room. And we assume that, and it's not the case. It's not true. I am the only Asian woman in the entire New York State legislature, and so I know that my perspective is probably unique, right? And I think that there's a lot of times when we have assumptions about where people are at, like for certain things, and we don't realize, like, actually history for our legislatures are actually so short, right? Just 30 years ago, there were not even not even 5% of the legislature was women. And so when you're talking about, like, whether or not there's legislation to do basic things like take the taxes off tampons, or to make sure that there's regulations on donor breast milk or anything, or child care, like, these are all different things that people are not thinking about unless you have those experiences. And that's why it's so important that we bring our knowledge to the fore, and that there's this shared experience, and that we have a diverse representation, all of those things. And I think that it's something that I feel like I've learned, and it's also really important to make sure that we have that knowledge base within our legislatures to be able to pull from.
Great, thanks. State Representative Kupa?
Thank you, Christina. I agree with a lot of what has been said by my fellow panelists. I just want to say one thing. I actually live in a district that had never been held by a Democrat before. And as an immigrant, one of the cities that I represent, Troy, which is where I live, has a very high population of immigrants. And so many of them don't vote. Either they're stuck in the green card process or on H-1B, or even though they got their green card, they never registered to vote. So it's interesting to see who I represent, but then who lives in the district isn't exactly the same. And so for me, I think one of the biggest things and most important thing in my toolkit is that I identify as brand American, right? And that to me, I'm at that intersection of so many different pieces of identity that I believe in pluralism. And I think my belief in pluralism is rooted in all the interfaith work I did before I came to office, where I built interfaith dialogue between people of different religious backgrounds. I actually co-founded a religious interfaith organization in Troy, in the Troy area, that has had a lot of impact on the region, but also Harvard teaches about it. And so that pluralism, which is that you can have multiple viewpoints. And it's sometimes funny because, for myself, I'm Indian origin, but I'm American. So it's like what would my mom say, right? Versus what would I do? And so I'm always conflicted at times, because my mom always told me, just you can't control other people's actions. You can only control your reactions. But then remembering that being in a participatory democracy or democratic republic, is that you must raise your voice. Diversity is a given, inclusion is about counting people, but belonging is having your voice heard. And so creating that space where you have pluralism, where you are confident enough to be able to state, and being in a frontline district, in a district that has, equal Democrat, Republican, Independent, and just that diversity of voices that I hear from, and being able to represent that, it really requires that belief in pluralism.
Great, thank you. So we've got a couple of questions from the audience, and I'm going to start with Senator Lee here. How do you build community and momentum in your campaign when there is little to no civic engagement from communities of color, especially the AAPI community?
That one's for me?
Yes.
I think building civic engagement is really important, and the previous speaker kind of spoke to that. But I think, really, and I think all the panelists have kind of addressed this, but really just being myself and having this role is an example for others, is an example that, yes, we can be a part of this process. We can work to drive this process and really impact it. And, encouraging those in our community to really participate in our process, whether it's voting, whether it's registering to vote, casting your vote, or even participating in the legislative process in terms of writing their elected leaders by participating in providing testimony on bills and really helping to educate our communities, but also helping them to really learn how to engage and how to use their voices, and seeing those voices as very, very powerful. And the more that we do that as a community, the more that we do that collectively, I think the better off we'll be, because, you know, so many of these issues that have been brought up about, you know, tampon tax and breastfeeding and things that are important to us as women, as mothers, but, you know, as AAPI also, I think, you know, those issues will never be brought to the forefront unless we use our voices to make it so.
Great, thank you. Councilwoman Tao?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. So when I ran in my race, I actually ran in a race where in Oakland, my district has the highest voting numbers every single time. But within my Hmong community, right, there's this mistrust of, you know, the government, an understanding of like, or a misunderstanding of, well, my vote will not count. How do I see my vote turn into, you know, fruits of the labor that I'm going to, if I'm going to support you? And so for me, you know, it was really important that not only did I get the support and the blessing from the voters in my district, of course, but really, it was really to go out into my community. I charged myself. There's actually not one Hmong person that lives in my district. And so I went back home and, you know, when you fundraise, you have to fundraise from all different parts, right? And I really just made sure that I hone in, and this is applicable in Oakland as well too, where I did run, is that I would go and figure out who were the thought leaders, right? Who are the thought leaders in your community, and really start at the dialogue with those thought leaders. And then through the thought leaders, really engaging with a wider breadth of community to really hear where I stand, why I feel like I can be able to lead, why I'm a good representation for you. And this is actually the epitome of one of the arguments. It's like, of course you don't believe or trust the government because there's no one there that looks like you. Right? No one there that looks like you. Let me be that champion because, you know, I believe in you. I see you. I hear you. I know our struggle. And if it's not me, then who? Right? If it's not me to try, then who? Right? And so I think that from that approach, I was able to get a lot of support. And now seeing me in office, you know, even though, like I said, I don't represent not one Hmong person, the Hmong community, you can just see like a whole change in the process of like, oh my gosh, we can actually get people like us elected into positions, right? And there's so many of us. And so let's make our voices heard. And, you know, and so there's power with that. And so when you work with groups that feel so powerless, and then they see the fruits of their labor, it really creates this great wave of empowerment that they now is intergenerational, right? So now they have learned this, now they will teach it to their kids and then their kids. And so it's actually a really beautiful thing. It's like a blank canvas, but you got to work hard. And you got to go to the people. You got to start with the thought leaders in the community, right? Gain the trust. You can't do anything if you don't have the trust of the community. And so gain the trust, and then that will open up accessibility to other people within that community.
Representative Koopa, do you want to add anything?
I was busy answering a question someone put in the side. I think it's exactly what the previous panelist just said, that we need to be able to have the trust of the community to be able to act in the best interest of the community, and having thought leaders and other elected officials. It's all about having that grassroots engagement. And I think that's really what I brought to the table too, is that I was really, like, every neighborhood where I knocked doors, I knew somebody through some civic activity. And so coming to office with that level of engagement is really important, because then you know what people are thinking, and you're able to be a better legislator when you have that kind of, you know, engagement with the community.
And, Assemblywoman Newt?
Yeah, no, I'm kind of fascinated and like astounded. I mean, I love the councilwoman's answer. I wish I was like that too. I just wasn't. I think it's amazing that she's so bold, and I think it's incredible to have that kind of drive and confidence. I was more just like, anybody else? Like, what is going on? Why am I like the person that can win? Like, what's going on? And so I think that when I kind of had that, you know, inner voice inside telling me all these things that I couldn't do, or like I don't fit these check boxes, like, or like, you know, I'm not like a tall white dude or whatever, you know, like all these things that I'm not, you know, like all the things that I'm not keep on going through my head. But instead, you know, I love the things that she was saying, because it's true. It's the way to get your community motivated, the way to get people to the table, the way to get AAPI folks to vote is definitely to make sure to let folks know how they're affected. I mean, I think that people don't realize that every single day, the policies that are going in and out, just like what the senator was saying, like every single day, like every single moment that we are seeing all of these things happen to us, we're being affected. Like the policies that are being passed, the things that are being done all the time without us touching it affect us. Like when we're going through this right now, the coronavirus, all of the things that are happening to our small businesses, to folks not being able to pay rent, people losing their jobs every single day, you know, all of these moments, people are now aware, like, oh, wow, like I didn't know that this is what I need to be involved in. Now it's too late. Like now it's like, what do we do now? You know? And so I think that this is why it's important for us to have folks ready, also for us to have like pipelines of folks who are interested and know that this is something that they can touch and affect. And I think that, you know, government is so interesting in that way, because it is something that is so easily changed if we just reach out to change it. But it can also be something that we don't have any impact over if we don't know how. And I think that it's something that we have to talk about as a community, to make sure that we are reaching out to folks and getting those, you know, those inputs. You know, I think that that's the biggest thing. And like I said, you know, I wish that everybody in our community would come out with the council members thinking, right? To think, you know, wow, like these are bridges that we can bridge, like these are the gaps that we can help to mend, and these are the ways that we can communicate with one another, to touch one another, and to be able to be, you know, able to change things together. And I'm the person to be able to do that. You know, I wish that everybody could do that in our community. And I'm hoping to get people there. I'm hoping to get myself there, right? But of course, like I think that you know, most folks in our communities are like, you know, I don't know how to do that. You know, and just like I was, you know, I don't know how to do that. I don't know why somebody would do that. That sounds awful. Like it sounds like miserable. But at the same time, I think that it's really important that we make it so that people understand that it's an option. And I think that young people in our Asian American communities, they don't even think that governing is an option of, you know, all the career choices out there. People don't realize it. And I think that that's one of the things that we should do too.
Representative Koopa, you had something that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I kind of forgot. I always, you know, you don't want to brag because part of politics is grandstanding and bragging, I think. But the thing is, at least 10 people after I got elected told me that they saw my name on the ballot and they registered to vote. They were green card holders who had never thought about voting. But because I was on the ballot as a fellow immigrant, they felt like they should register. And it was the same thing, like all those stakeholders that kept on telling me you should run for office, you should run for office. Many of them weren't people of color, but one person significantly was the one, Rashida Tlaib, was actually the first person to tell me that I should run for state rep. You know, I always thought I was going to run for school board because I'm so passionate about public education, but she was the one who said, well, we make the decisions in the state house. This was during her final term. And for her to tell me that I should join the state house. And I really didn't think about it until the confirmation of Betsy DeVos in 2017, and that's why I ran in 18. But having people tell you that you should run, and then having people tell you that they voted because you were on the ballot, that they registered to vote because you were on the ballot, it's very powerful. And I think that speaks to what you were saying, is like, how do you get people involved? Is people from the community that are in touch with the community running for office. I think it's really important.
Great. I think we have time for one more question. Or Assemblywoman Newt, did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh no, I just wanted to say that it takes women so much more convincing to run for office. They did a study, and it's like, literally for a woman to run for office, they had to like be asked like 20 times more than like men. And like men just like wake up in the morning and they're just like, hello, I'm gonna run for office today. Like whereas like women, it just takes like a million more asks, and I think like for people of color even more so. Yeah.
So true. So I would love, I think, to end with just all of you to share one experience or a story about a time when you felt most powerful and powerfully effective. And what were those 2 or 3 elements that made it so? Was it like people, skills, timeliness, anything like that? I think everyone thinks that power is such a dirty word sometimes, and we forget how power can be something, a force for good. So is there someone that would like to kick off with that? Assembly, State Representative?
Sure. Representative, do you want to go first? Okay. I have to say, this is in the state capitol. We have a beautiful state capitol, and we have school field trips that come. And so when the district, somebody from the district comes, I usually run over to the capitol from the House Office building to meet the classes that come over. And one particular group, early on, little girl was part of the group, and she kept on touching everything and asking too many questions, or not too many, but like the teacher was like, Nivi, don't do this. Nivi, don't touch that. Nivi, don't ask so many questions. And she was just really like hyper. And at the end of it all, and I didn't mind answering any. I like meeting the kids because they are the ones who ask the best questions. They have no fear. And so at the end, she pulled out her little book and says, Representative Koopa, can you give me your autograph? And I was just like, I'm just like I'm your neighbor. Like I did not feel like I was material to give an autograph. But then I looked at her as I grabbed the book and I go, Nivi, is your name Nivedita? And she looked at me and she reminded me of me because she had 2 braids tightly, coiled, like my mom sent me to school with a little bindi on her head. And she's looking at me so earnestly. And when I said Nivedita, she looked at me like her face bloomed because I said her name right. And I knew her name. It wasn't just a nickname. And it just being seen, being felt. And I almost cried because it was very powerful for me to realize that young girl's reality is going to be so different from mine because she saw someone who looked like her as a leader. And so, like, just even if I don't pass a bill, which I haven't yet, that moment was so powerful for me that little girl could see at a young age that she can embrace this idea of democracy.
Thank you for that story. Senator Lee?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you shared that, Rep. Koopa. Thank you so much. To be completely honest, I'm really still, I find myself in awe of the collective empowerment that I really felt on Inauguration Day here on Guam in 2018. I'm so proud of my island, my home, that many Americans only know as this tiny little island in the middle of the Pacific. We were actually the first in the United States to elect a supermajority of women to our state or territorial legislature. And it came on the same day that we installed our first female governor. And so at that time, we had all 3 branches of government led by women. So, our governor was a female, our chief justice was a female, and the speaker of our house was also female. And so it was just a very empowering message about how far we've come as a community. And also, like Rep. Koopa was sharing, just a really great message of empowerment to all of the women and the girls in Guam and, across the country and across the world that, we can be a part of these systems and we can contribute. I also, want to say that I really find power in my community. I'm from, again, like in the Pacific island of Guam, and the indigenous people of Guam are called Chamorro. And we have been here for centuries. So just remembering that and drawing strength from that, respecting that history and honoring those who came before me is a really very super powerful thing that I often have to remember. And, you know, it's really the power in our voices. I think Assembly Member Newt touched on this, whether it's, you know, folks are struggling with unemployment or, you know, trying to stay in business, or working families trying to keep food on the table or juggle childcare, you know, all of having our communities see us as agents of change is incredibly powerful.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to say that, you know, thank you so much for sharing both of your stories. I think that that's amazing. And like drawing strength from folks across the nation who go through very similar things is really awesome. I think that for me, one of the most powerful moments I felt like I changed something was definitely when we were on the floor talking about the Child Victims Act. I know that, you know, I brought it up a little bit earlier, but I had shared my own experience, and that wasn't something that I guess was normal on the floor. And I felt like for me, even though at that moment it didn't feel powerful, at that moment it didn't feel awesome, at that moment I was more afraid of like what my family was going to say about me opening up these things to my larger family who didn't know. And I knew that like it was going to hit the fan, right? And so I was really afraid. But at the same time, what was amazing was that so many people who were victims of childhood sexual assault were able to come forward and tell me about what had happened to them. But what was also amazing was that I didn't know that in that room across the hall, my best friend Alessandra Biaggi was giving a very similar testimony, and that 3 other women would get up and talk about what had happened to them. And so, you know, I think that was the moment when I realized, like, you know, it's okay to just be me. I think that, you know, what I was talking about earlier, and, you know, I think when we were talking about leadership and things like that, I realized that, you know, there's so many ways to show that leadership, and there's so many ways to impact folks. And sometimes it's just being truthful and honest and being who you are, and that's enough, you know. And I think that I didn't have to be different in any way at that moment to advocate for the people who needed it the most. And I think that it was so awesome to know that I needed to be exactly who I was at that moment for everybody else. And that's like representation, right? And that's like how it feels, and that's how it works. And I think that was like probably, you know, the biggest piece that had been, you know, stagnant for so long. And we were able to move Republicans. We were able to move so many people to vote for this piece of legislation that had stayed stagnant for almost 2.5 decades. So, you know, that I feel like, you know, is what we can do when we bring a different perspective to the table.
Thank you for sharing that story. Councilwoman?
Wow, I'm on a panel with just some amazing heroes or sheroes, and so thank you all for sharing your story. You know, I think that when I felt most powerful, and you know, and I think we're hearing the same thing here, right? And the same thing here is, you know, that we've had such impact. When we feel the most powerful is when we have impact on people's lives. And so, you know, whether it's through legislation or domestic violence survivor, you know, I left my relationship at 6 months when I was pregnant, with 6 months pregnant with my son, because I didn't want him to experience that. But, you know, I always tell people when I do speak up and speak out about domestic violence, especially in the Hmong community, there's prevalence in all different culture around domestic violence. And for me, so many women have come up to me after my speeches and said, you know, it's so great to see that, you know, you're able to overcome all your darkness, and, you know, now you're a leader, leading the way, leading the charge, or what have you. And for me, I don't see it as like, oh, this is a big deal. You know, when I ran my campaign, I actually thought about maybe I shouldn't speak about it, right? Because there's this like weird shame of it. And also not just that, but then my son doesn't know about it. And so one day he'll get older and read about it. And so, but it was my truth, and I decided to move forward with it. And during my campaign, I did have men come up to me and say, you know, you should really take that down because it looks like you just are asking for a pity party. And for me, it really just, I took that and said, okay, well, I really need to leave it up. You know, and so, but yeah, no, it's, you know, the power of inspiration is why we need to be our genuine self. And that's exactly right, Assembly member. You know, I learned really quickly that being myself, that's how I was going to be able to, you know, win people over, is just, you know, being my true, genuine self. And I think that that is something that there's no price tag on it or what have you, because people can relate. They may not speak about it, but people can relate to these like real life scenarios and experiences that we have all, you know, gone through or experienced one point or another, or know somebody who experienced it. And it goes right back to representation. You know, representation goes further than like looking like somebody. It's about experiences, right? As a daughter refugee, as a single mom, as a domestic violence survivor, you know, I mean, I always, in my stories, when I talk to young people around domestic violence and what a healthy relationship looks like, I always say, you know, for me, I left because 6 months in, I was pregnant, and he was still kicking me in the stomach while I was pregnant. I had to leave, you know, I had to protect my baby. And so, yes, I went homeless. I went homeless. I lived in my car with my baby for, you know, months. And so I understand what it feels like to be homeless as well. You know, so these are all experiences that comes together, and we call it representation. And so I think it is powerful that we tell our stories, and that, because through storytelling, you know, you don't know who you're going to inspire or impact, and what kind of impact you'll have on their life. And it actually is life-saving.
Wow. Thank you all so much for sharing your experiences, your personal stories, and just where you all come from. And your constituents are all really lucky to have you as their representatives in government. So I just want to thank everyone that joined us in the audience, and we'll give the panelists a virtual round of applause. So thank you so much again for joining us today.